Hello, everyone. My name is Scarlett. I'm the Communications Director of ScienceHolic and today's host. Welcome back to day 2 of ScienceHolic's 2022 conference. Yesterday, we heard from Dr. Surumi and Dr. Fonda, and today we have 2 more amazing webinars lining up, starting with Dr. Angela Schmider. Welcome, Doctor.
Hello.
Before we begin, let me give a brief introduction of what ScienceHolic is. We are a youth-run nonprofit that aims to introduce intricate scientific concepts in a manner that's fun and comprehensive to teens. We also offer various opportunities to students around the world, including those with English as their second language, to explore various fields in STEM with unique volunteer and leadership opportunities. Our main mission is to serve as a free resource for students to learn more about various STEM topics. And other than this webinar branch, we also publish seasonal magazine editions. We recently published a 5th. You can check it on our website later on. We also publish blogs and articles about various areas of STEM, and also a bi-yearly review where we allow high schoolers to publish their research papers for a lower cost than most official publications. But you're not here to hear me rant about ScienceHolic. You're here to listen to our guest speaker. Dr. Schmider, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I would. Well, first, thank you, ScienceHolic, for having me. I'm excited to be here, and I'm more than happy to share my experience and how I made decisions, and I guess how my life has turned out so far regarding, the career in science. So you can call me Angie. My maiden name is Bear, but I moved it to my middle name when I got married during my, oh my gosh, was it? It was during my postdoc that I got married. Yes. So a late bloomer in that sense, but it's all relative. But anyway, yes. So I went to college in Ohio, where I was born and raised. I grew up on a farm. I raised sheep and pigs and horses. It was amazing. And I majored in biology. I wanted to become an optometrist at first, but then once I started college, I was like, nope, it's not for me. I'm more curious about the earth and biology in general. So I graduated with a bachelor's in biology, and then I realized I still didn't know what I was going to do, right? So I got a job as a lab technician, and then I decided I would taste the field of pharmacology. So I got a master's in pharmacology, still in Ohio. And then I said, yeah, I want more. So then I pursued a PhD in pharmacology in Chicago, which if you've ever been to Chicago, you probably know how amazing it is. But it's a very cosmopolitan, diverse, really cool city. So I had a lot of fun there too. But yeah, that's me. And now I'm in Boston with my family. I have 2 kids, 8 and 9 years old, and I live with my husband as well.
Great. Before I move on to the main content, attendees, if you have any questions, please send them in the chat. We'll go over them at the end of the webinar if they haven't been already answered. So let's begin. Dr. Schmider, what is the focus of your academic and research career, and what differentiates immunology from other biology subfields?
Well, the main focus still, no matter where I am in life, is my family. It really does come first. But with science, so I was interested in biology in general. I had lots of questions, but I kind of, to be honest, I was trained in pharmacology, which is somewhat connected to, cell biology, immunology, because, like physics, chemistry, biology, they're 3 epicenters that kind of share the same family. So they're all connected. But through just hanging with my peers and different mentors, I was guided. I didn't choose exactly I chose my path, but my influences definitely guided me. And after my pharmacology training, I still wanted to dabble with what I learned, but I wanted to bridge it with something new. So when I went for my postdoc, I interviewed a few places, not too many, because I wasn't going to spend a lot of time and money flying places and interviewing, because back then some places would pay for you to come visit and give a talk, but other places you would have to get yourself there, and nothing was virtual. So I limited myself, and I wanted to bring what I had learned in my training, but also I wanted something new. So that's how I ended up in immunology. And right now it's really an important field, but I think it's always been an important field. And immunology differs from other sciences in that it's how we survive on Earth. It's how we protect ourselves from any foreign invader. So I think that's really pretty cool. And I wasn't taught how to teach in college. I know now, like a lot of people, it's encouraged to become a TA or a teaching assistant. I never did that in college. I kind of, in hindsight, to be honest, I wish I would have. But I now teach. I've been teaching for over a decade at Harvard. I teach life sciences. It's a lab course and a lecture. And I also teach immunology in the summer. So if you're ever interested in taking an immunology course, an introduction to immunology with lab in the summer, I'm your person. But anyway, that's how I mean, yeah, I also am still curious about other fields of science. So immunology also, like I said, like everything kind of blends, but it's nice to have a niche. So I use a lot of microscopes. So instead of studying every single cell in the body, I just study immune cells, but I can look at different things that affect other parts of the body. So that's kind of how I narrowed myself to immunology versus anything else.
It's great. So you do a lot of research, I'm sure, but what does your typical day look like? Are you always in the lab, or are you with your family most of the time? So, and how do you manage your time between your different roles?
Yeah, time management is definitely an essential point of, I think, just being sane. So I like to exercise. So I exercise every morning. I make time for that, but my family helps me work that out too. I take my kids to school. I make that to be an important point. Otherwise, no, yeah, I have to have that fill. And then I go to work. So I go to work. Well, I guess if you're talking about now where I am, as a postdoc, it's totally different. Postdoc, you work harder. I worked a lot harder in my postdoc than I do now. So there's that. But now, if you're asking the question in present time, yeah, I go to work from, I don't know, I guess I'm not all about FaceTime. So it's just, you go there, you connect, you meet with your lab, you teach, you mentor. I'm still learning, so I learn new things and I go home. Like I'm not there from 9 to 5 just because you're supposed to be there at a job, because our society said some stupid rules to be there from 9 to 5. Like we go, we get our jobs done, we plan for the next week or the future, and we go home. So yeah, I exercise, I go to work around 9 or 10. I'm very efficient. I do my stuff. We talk, phone calls. I do a lot of experiments in the lab still. I mentor a lot of students, and I'm home by 5. I may do work at night sometimes, but not a lot. And my weekends I'm off. But I've also earned this schedule. Like I know a lot of people don't have such a flexible schedule. I'm very grateful for it. But I made a priority for it to work.
I do think it's important to differentiate between work and life in general. Otherwise, you're entirely consumed by work. So
yeah, and then you get sick, and you're not healthy. Yeah,
I do appreciate your dedication to separating your work life and making it acceptable schedule for yourself. Moving on. Why did you choose a particular path? I remember you mentioning about it before, but did your plans change when you were in your undergraduate or university years? And how did you eventually decide on a specialty in immunology?
So yeah, so college, all right, and my parents didn't even really make me go to college. Like I wanted to go. So there was that. I didn't have a plan no one made a plan for me. They just expect me to be a good person and be happy and healthy. So with that, yeah, I went to college, and then I just kept wanting more and more and more. So I thought I would always be in the industry. So during my PhD, I said, there's no way I'm going to academia. They get paid peanuts. You have to work all the time, and I'm not doing it. Well, that's the only place I've been. So that was, a curveball, but I'm grateful for it, because it's not, again, there's more flexibility in academia than there is in industry, for sure. So that was something I didn't expect. And how I chose my postdoc is through, it's kind of like a domino. So I had like the first domino of, of training or of life, how I was raised, whatnot. And then the second domino is like what I learned in my master's. And the third domino was what I learned in my PhD. Well, I didn't want to stay there, but I wanted to connect to the next piece. So I just had like a common thread. Well, I didn't know any immunology. I wasn't trained in that, but I knew a lot of cell signaling. I knew a lot of cell biology in general. So I just made a bridge to the next move, which is a postdoc. And then from there, I didn't use a lot of microscopes and in training, but then I learned how to use all these microscopes, including the fanciest in the world. So you just surround yourself with good people, and you get along and just kind of feel your environment, and you'll thrive.
It's a really great quote at the end. Say someone is interested in immunology or in pharmacology. How can someone follow your path? What should they study in university, degrees? What should they do on the side? And is there anything that you wish someone else had told you before you started on this career path?
Interesting. So for your first answer, or to your first question, I know today is very different. Like age is relative. I've been on Earth though, I think for a long time, but I never shadowed anyone in college, ever. I didn't even hold a pipette in college. Like I didn't learn how to use a pipette until I started my master's degree. So even though that sounds crazy now, because I have high school students who have been in my lab, which is just wild to me. So I think yes, it's nice to kind of get ahead, but that doesn't always pay off, because it may make you have tunnel vision, right? So you just have to more so know you and have an idea, have some type of idea of where you want to go. But yes, shadowing someone I think can be helpful, or like getting a master's. Like I earned a master's degree before committing myself to, it took me 6 years for my PhD and 2 years for a master's. So I committed to a master's program to get like a bite of what a whole meal would be with a PhD. So that was helpful to me. And then the second question, I wish I would have had more experience to teach during my training. Like no one ever said, hey, you should go TA. Hey, you should look for advertisements. No one ever did that. So I taught myself. And yeah, like I said, like I teach now and I love it. If anything, if I had to choose between the wet lab, like doing research in the lab and teaching, I actually would pick teaching. I love it, but I'm fortunate I can do both. But that's one thing I wish someone would have told me.
What about during your younger years, maybe before your master's in undergraduate college? What would you think that would have benefited you during those years? Well, in hindsight.
Sure. I didn't like, maybe if someone would have said, hey, why don't you go work in a lab for a summer just to see what it's like to be in a lab? Like I didn't have any lab experience until I started a master's program. So I was totally in the dark, but maybe that's just how that was the style then. That was maybe where I went to school, and was, it was in the 90s. So it was, the way things were done was different. But I guess if you know what you want to do, you can't really blunt your learning. You can just kind of discover more. But I don't know, find a mentor, trust that person, and ask questions. So I do have one example. So after I got my master's, I was slightly interested in being a drug representative. So I got someone interviewed me at Pfizer. And again, this is in the 90s. And they're like, well, hey, you can come work for us. And I mean, the salary was insane. I'm like, what? I'm going to earn that much money? And I get my own car, I get a new computer, I do all this. I'm like, I don't know, it sounds too good to be true. So I'm like, let me go shadow someone for the day. So, because they offered me the job. And so I went and shadowed this other gal my age. And oh my gosh, no way. No. Not for me. So I'm so glad I just sit and looked at all those like fancy figures on paper, because the daily life, I would have been absolutely miserable. So test the waters before you commit.
So I think it kind of relates to this next question. What kind of advice would you give to high school students, which is the majority of our attendees today, high schoolers, who are considering a career in STEM?
just make sure you know what you want to do. And competition is fair to feel competitive, but it's not everything. Like to feel like I'm trying to teach my kids this, like it's good to be competitive and it's good to fail. Failure actually, like I had some hardships in college. I had a hard time with biochemistry. My brain just it would not click. And but going through those struggles really helped me learn in a different way. I became more of a hands-on learner. So with STEM, like I know today is so competitive. Like in the summer course that I teach at Harvard for immunology, like I have high school juniors, like this is a collegiate level course, but they're trying to get ahead. And so I get that. But if your heart's in it and you know what you want and you can convey that to other people, that's what you need. And you need some support from, family and friends and such. But just try to feel happy in your own skin and then you'll be successful.
That's a really great advice. Thank you so much. Now we're finished discussion questions and we're going to move on to the live Q&A portion. We actually have a question from earlier. What is teaching advanced topics such as immunology to other less experienced people, like, as you said, high school juniors? What's it like to teach high schoolers something that's college level?
Well, considering that it's a 7-week course and not a 13-week course, it's extremely accelerated. I tend to talk quickly. Teaching in person is definitely better than teaching virtually. But the one thing I've learned is that I learn more. I learn how to curb my attitude and energy towards people who want to learn. So if anything, my students have helped me learn more, which then just makes me more confident and I just want to teach more. So it's a nice vicious cycle.
What would you describe as a vicious cycle though? Isn't it?
Vicious cycle is like, okay, oh wait, they didn't understand that word, so I need to use a metaphor. So I parent my kids with metaphors. And actually I give a TED talk using art with science, right? So if you can say, oh my gosh, if you can use a metaphor to explain, let's say, for example, how a receptor, receives a ligand, that's kind of like a lock and key. Like you need to have that interaction or that ligation. So if you can make different metaphors on different levels, you can really get through to different people who think in different ways. And teaching to different levels of people has helped me embrace that.
We have another direct message to me. What is the most exciting part of your research career since you started relatively late? Is there does a lack of your early experience hinder your current progress?
No, if anything, I feel like this is a little crazy, but I feel like it was always in me. And then it just came out at the end, So it's like, it doesn't matter. Everyone comes from different backgrounds. Everyone, like where I went to college is not an Ivy League school. It's Bowling Green State University in Ohio. Again, I came from a farm. Like, so I don't have like this pedigree of being groomed to go to Harvard. No, but I was happy where I was. I was happy with me. And I was happy, like, okay, I got this. I'm going to take the next step. So I kept moving with confidence. And that's how I am where I am today. And I'm still pretty happy. So, and don't compare and despair. That will eat you alive. So you have to be good with you as a person and as a scientist and as a doctor and as anything else that you want to be in life.
That's some really great advice, since right now with this generation, I feel like everything is really competitive and we're trying to get ahead, like be better than the other person, but I feel sometimes you just have to know yourself and that's it.
Yeah, that's the biggest part of life in general. I'm serious. Like if you are happy with you and you know what you can do, you're way ahead of everyone else.
The first part of that question is, what's the most exciting part of your research?
Well, so there's one quote that we say during the year in the life sciences class I teach at Harvard. It's like, oh my gosh, so I'm actually going to fail so many times that it's significant. It's statistically significant, because failure is epic in research. But when something works, it's like glorious. It's like, really, it worked? Or I don't know, like of course you have to do it again. but most of the time things fail. So when something works, but work is kind of weird because it could be the opposite of your hypothesis, which has happened to me several times, which is like, what? And you know, that's what's really cool. It's like, wait, well, no. I thought in this certain mouse that didn't have that gene, I would get a decrease in what I'm looking at. No, I got the increase. Like what? Like, so it totally threw a curveball. And then it kind of like gives you a boost. So it's kind of nice when you're wrong. And then you prove you're right.
This is a question from me, actually.
Mhm.
How has the pandemic COVID-19 affected your work?
It's like it put the brakes on everything. Our lab had to shut down. I mean, it takes years to get animals back in the animal facility breeding, but it's like we're let's say the lab runs at 65 miles an hour. We were at 65, 70 here and there before pandemic put it at 0. And now we're probably back at 50. So it's taken a lot of time to catch up. And also for me, like I'm not a person who thrives independently, like in terms of not being around other people. So I need to be around other people. I feed off their energy, they feed off mine. We get more done because we're in person, we can talk. We don't have to say like, I'm waiting for their message. What would they say? What's their reply? It's like, no, just get it done in real time. I am a little hasty. But so the pandemic hurt me in terms of my motivation, honestly, because I didn't have that fuel to be around other people. So, but now we're back in the lab. So I'm filling back up.
We have a question from Denise. Would you encourage young students wanting a STEM career to still pursue interests considered outside STEM, like visual arts or other creative outlets? Can this be beneficial in any way?
Okay, that gave me goosebumps. I could cry. Yes, my husband is a musician. But anyway, just to say, no, the arts I feel like are so complementary to science. It's essential. I have a lot of students here who are majoring in visual arts and theater and also in science. And I feel it's a beautiful pair. Like if you think of, so back in the day when MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, when it was first built and created and how the thinkers were there and what they wanted to put together as a collective, you had a sociologist beside a physicist, beside a social worker, beside a mathematician, beside a cell biologist, et cetera. They were all together in the quad and they fed off of each other. And that's what really, I feel, made it superior. Now everything's kind of like compartmentalized. Here's the cell biologist over here. Here's the physics. So I like it when everyone talks because we see a view that is not just from your tunnel vision of hanging out with cell biologists all day. Like Einstein even said, right? Like if you can convey your message of what you're trying to explain to a 6-year-old, and then you understand it and they will too. So I feel like we have that communication among fields, different interests. It helps everyone. So yes, please stay with the arts.
You talking about the arts reminded me of, you say you've combined arts and science for your TED Talk. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I was, well, I appreciate art. I used to paint abstractly, but I've always listened to music and, you know, I appreciate the arts, and from operas to ballets to, I don't know, pop rock. I mean, I love hard rock, but anyway, to all music. And I was taking an Uber one day to work. For some reason, I usually bike to work, but anyway, this I gave the talk in 2016, and the drivers just started talking, and we started talking about. I'm like, oh my gosh, I know. Like I see things when I run along the Charles River that remind me of like DNA, and I saw all these similar patterns. And I'm like, and I'm realizing, oh my gosh, like nature and science are, I know like the Fibonacci sequence and all that has already been like shown and talked about how it's similar to DNA. But I started to see it everywhere. Then I realized if I can convey my, because I want things drawn for me, which I don't have the art talent to do so, but if I can convey what I want painted to an artist, like a science thing painted to an artist who has no history of science, then I'm able to communicate my idea to a person who doesn't understand science at all. And that is what started, that's when the light went off in my head. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's about communication, like truly. So anyway, that's how the TED Talk arrived. Oh, but the driver, yes. So the driver, the Uber driver knew of someone who was lining up TED pitches for that weekend. And he's like, you should call so-and-so. I'm like, what? I'm like, I don't know. They're like, yeah, do it. I'm like, fine. So this guy, Steve was his name. I emailed this other person. I said, hey, your friend Steve, I was in Uber with him. I hope this is real. But he said, you're listening to pitches for the weekend, and here's this. And he invited me in. So I had 48 hours to refine my pitch. And I gave my pitch, and that's kind of how it all started.
48 hours. That's really a time pressure.
But I like pressure too. I call it positive pressure. So yeah.
We have another question in the chat. How does your work in the university intertwine with work in the hospital?
Good question. So my lab is at Mass General Hospital. And the teaching is separate because Mass General is just a hospital. But what I do is I take a real project from my lab and I take it over to the college. And students that, the life sciences class that I teach, the students that take the course, they're actually working on a project that in my lab. But the cool thing is Harvard's paying for all the reagents, not me. And yeah, they work on a real project. And what's also cool is that what's a win-win is that at least 1 or 2 students every year, they ask to volunteer in the lab. So then they'll end up working with me, sometimes on a stipend, sometimes not on a stipend, but they'll work for, if they're a junior till the rest of their career, sometimes there's a senior thesis. So they found my lab as a place to do their research for undergrad. This past 4 years ago, I met a freshman and she asked to volunteer in the lab and I was like, sure. And then she just graduated from Harvard and she has her first author paper. So there's that sharing, that's a win-win, which is really great.
I think we have one more question in the chat about how do you deal with the positives? How do you deal with pressure and stress, and what do you think is positive pressure?
Stress? What stress? Joking. Okay, yes, there is stress. I exercise. That's my outlet for real. If I don't exercise, I can't think. So that truly just helps me overall as a human being. But in the lab, you can't get bullied by the NIH. You can't get bullied by your peers, and you can't be bullied by rejection. You just have to keep going, and you need a positive environment. So when I chose my postdoc, the reason I chose the lab where I am in now, which he and I still work together, we share an office, we share students, we share the whole lab together. He told me that his family came first, but he was already successful. I was like, how are you doing that? Like, aren't you here like all the time? But I guess he was probably in his late 50s when I joined the lab, but still he had kids in high school, college. But that really made an impression on me because he found a way to balance it. I'm like, well, if he can do it, he can teach me to do it. And that's what's happened. So I'm in a healthy environment.
That's a really great way to, I think, end this webinar, since I don't see any more questions in the chat. So let us start wrapping up. Here are all of ScienceHolic social media. We have Instagram, Wechat, YouTube, where we're going to post this webinar recording, LinkedIn and Discord, where we also have small chats where people can discuss various their interest in STEM. You can see the sign up link in the chat. And attendees, if you want to work with ScienceHolic, here are some various ways you can do so. You can join as a team member in one of our 6 teams: editing, content, outreach, art, social media, website. You can help us organize webinars like these or our magazines and blog posts. If you want a low commitment way to help us, you can become an ambassador. Or if you have written something for your biology class or chemistry class, you can submit your article through our blog and /magazine article submissions. If you have a research paper, you can submit it for a review. Or if you just want to get updates about future webinars and magazine publications, you can just join our mailing list. Well, And that is it. Thank you so much, Dr. Schmider, for your valuable advice. It was great talking to you and hearing about your research, your career, and your outlook on life. It's really enlightening. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for what you're doing. It's really important.
Thank you so much, Steph, for the praise. And attendees, thank you for joining. Please tune in again at 7 p.m. EST in about 1.5 hours to hear from our last webinar of this conference from Dr. Robin Haynes. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good night. Thank you.
Bye.